The Russian Defense Ministry has claimed to have fired warning shots on a UK naval vessel. And we also have some reporting that they were dropping bombs in the path of the UK Navy as they were entering Russian-occupied waters just off of Crimea. Now, of course, Russia claims this territory as their own, saying they legally annexed Crimea, which is a small peninsula south of Ukraine, while many others in the world, especially in Ukraine, view Crimea as still part of Ukraine. There's a very complicated conflict story that goes back well before the Trump administration. And I think this story shows a lot of what we feared with the election of Joe Biden. Before Donald Trump got elected, there were escalating tensions in eastern Ukraine as Russia was trying to annex certain areas of Ukraine. They want access to the Black Sea, where it's basically their only warm water port. The U.S., NATO, Western allies opposed this. During the presidency of Donald Trump, Trump really simmered down tensions. Of course, there were some issues with firing missile strikes into Syria, drone strikes, but we had the Abraham Accords. And it seems like under Donald Trump, we are moving closer towards peace, although there was a potential for war with China under Trump, as there still is. Now that Joe Biden is president, it's back to business as usual, and we are seeing the conflict escalate in this region. It was only a couple of weeks ago the HMS Trent was seen moving through the Bosphorus Strait, which is through Istanbul, which enters into the Black Sea. And it seems like this could be a very serious escalation in the aggression between Western forces and Russia. I don't know for sure, but there's also now reporting concerns that Russia and China have strong military ties. The U.S. denies this. But China and Russia are apparently threatening repercussions for U.S. military aggression. And China has very much so been mocking the U.S. We saw it in the meeting that China had with Tony Blinken, where they basically said the U.S. is not strong. And now we are hearing them saying to us, you do not have the strength to oppose us. This could be saber rattling. It could be business as usual with international conflict. But there's a very serious threat of war between the U.S. and China, and it may bring in Russia. Now, Russia isn't the same level of power as many of these other countries, or particularly China. They are very, very strong. Some refer to them as a regional power, not a superpower, but China seems to be the real threat. So we don't know for sure whether or not Russia would team up with China in the event of an actual conflict, but it's starting to seem more and more like it is because, well, look, in my opinion, the Democrats have been doing everything in their power to alienate Russia and not see them as allies in this potential conflict with China. Perhaps that was Trump's opinion. Or maybe Trump didn't have one, but the people working with Trump felt we need to keep Russia closer so they don't go inside with China because we know they don't like China, but what do we get instead? The Russian narrative is back. Vladimir Putin is the new boogeyman. And of course, the Democrats want to push that narrative. So here we go. Russia will be pushed closer towards China. China and Russia will then start communicating together and threatening the United States. And then we see the very serious repercussions. If war breaks out, Russia is going to be with China and probably many other countries. And this could be bad news. Let me go through what exactly is happening, what they're saying. And I want to mention, too, the reason why I think this is significant is that we are in the crisis period in the fourth turning. Whether you agree with the theory or not, they suggest that now we're in this crisis period, we should be entering some very serious war. The last crisis we had was World War II. Now, of course, in between these generations, there are certain crises, but the crisis period, which we are in right now, suggests a major international conflict fought with the most powerful weapons available. So when we see things like this, can only hope it's just saber rattling, and there will be a de-escalation. This is serious. Reports that they fired warning shots and were dropping bombs in front of a UK Royal Naval vessel. This is serious stuff. So let's read the news. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com. Become a member to help support our work. Not only do you get access to our members only area, we had an excellent exclusive segment with Steve Bannon, who's had a lot of things YouTube does not allow. So you definitely want to check this one out. We also have a bunch of news articles popping up in our news section. The new website will be launching in just a few weeks. And we're going to be doing paranormal mysteries and culture building as well. So if you want to support real journalism on the ground reporting, this is what we are building towards. That's what your membership gets you. So go to timcast.com, sign up, but don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and please share this video if you think the work that we do here at Timcast is good and you think people need to know what's happening, sharing this video is the most important thing you can do because we do not have the marketing power of CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. Let's read the story from the BBC and see exactly what's going on, who's right, who's wrong, and how serious is this. The BBC reports, HMS Defender, Russian jets and ships target British warship. Moscow's defense ministry said a patrol ship fired warning shots and a jet dropped bombs in the path of the HMS Defender as it sailed some 12 miles off Crimea's coast. The UK government rejected Russia's account of the incident and denied that any warning shots had been fired. A BBC correspondent on the warship said it was harassed by Russia's military. Now, I have to say, according to this reporter, Jonathan Beale, who's on the ship, his account seems to support what Russia said, but we'll go through it. They go on to say, aircraft could be heard overhead as the BBC's defense correspondent, Jonathan Beale, filed a report from the deck of the HMS Defender in the Black Sea as it sailed to Georgia. He described hostile warnings over the radio as the warship's crew prepared for a possible confrontation. Our correspondent, who had been invited on board the ship before the incident happened, saw more than 20 aircraft overhead and 2 Russian Coast Guard boats, which at times were just 100 meters away. It's only 300 or so feet. This is at odds with statements from both the British Prime Minister's office and Defense Ministry, which denied any confrontation. Sorry. We got a reporter on the deck of a Royal Naval vessel, and the Defense Ministry is saying, no, nothing happened. I'm pretty sure they were all there, and the reporter, in my opinion, is more trustworthy. The Ministry of Defense said, no warning shots have been fired at HMS Defender. The Royal Navy ship is conducting innocent passage through Ukrainian territorial waters in accordance with international law. We believe the Russians are undertaking a gunnery exercise in the Black Sea and provided the maritime community with prior warning of the activity. No shots were directed at HMS Defender, and we do not recognize the claim that bombs were dropped in her path. What does that mean? We don't recognize that claim. Well, were bombs dropped or not? I'd like to know. They're going to say Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine in 2014, but this has not been recognized internationally. While it claims the peninsula and its waters as Russian territory, the UK says HMS Defender was passing through Ukrainian waters in a commonly used and internationally recognized transit route. Russia's defense ministry said the dangerous actions of the Navy ship entering the waters were a gross violation of the UN Convention sea laws and called for the crew to be investigated. A later tweet from the Russian embassy in the UK said, quote, HMS Defender turns HMS Provocateur and violates Russian border. Not exactly a routine transit, is it? But a UK government spokesman played down any notion of a confrontation, insisting that Russia was doing gunnery exercises. As is routine, Russian vessels shadowed the ship's passage, and she was made aware of the training exercise in her wider vicinity, UK Defense Secretary Ben Wallace added. The British ambassador was summoned to the Russian Foreign Ministry in Moscow and met with officials on Wednesday afternoon. I'm not a big fan of Russia, but it certainly seems like their assessment is probably true and correct. Let me read for you what the journalist actually said and then revisit this, because it seems like what happened is the UK deliberately entered Russian-occupied waters. It doesn't matter if you recognize their claims or not. They do occupy the area. This was probably meant to send a statement that we will not recognize your claim to these waters. Do something about it. So Russia, seeing as though they claim these waters are theirs, pushed back saying, you just invaded our space. On board the HMS Defender, a statement from Jonathan Beale, defense correspondent, saying, I am on board the warship in the Black Sea. The crew were already at action stations as they approached the southern tip of Russian-occupied Crimea. Weapons systems on board the Royal Navy destroyer had already been loaded. Oh, man. Not sounding good. This would be a deliberate move to make a point to Russia. HMS Defender was going to sail within 12 miles, within the 12-mile limit of Crimea's territorial waters. The captain insisted he was only seeking safe passage through an internationally recognized shipping lane. 2 Russian Coast Guard ships that were shadowing the Royal Navy warship tried to force it to alter its course. At one stage, one of the Russian vessels closed in to about 100 meters. Increasingly hostile warnings were issued over the radio, including one that said, if you don't change your course, I will fire. We did hear some firing in the distance, but they were believed to be well out of range. As HMS Defender sailed through the shipping lane, it was buzzed by Russian jets. The captain, Vincent Owen, said the ship detected more than 20 military aircraft nearby. Commander Owen said his mission was confident but non-confrontational. Russia said the incident happened in the Black Sea near Cape Philent in the south of Crimea. According to the Russian military, at 12:06 and 12:08 local time, its border patrol ship sent a warning shot to try and make the British warship change course. About 10 minutes later, a military jet dropped warning bombs in the path of the destroyer. The incident is reminiscent of a similar incident in November 2020, when Russia accused a U.S. warship of traveling 2 kilometers into its waters in the Sea of Japan. Russia's defense ministry said it had warned the USS John McCain that it would be rammed if it continued sailing in the territorial waters before chasing off the warship. However, the U.S. Navy said those claims were false and that its ship had not been expelled from the area. I hope this is nothing. This very well may be nothing. But Jonathan Beale also mentioned that he says the crew on the HMS Defender have been on high alert. At one stage, they did put on anti-flash masks to protect their faces just in case there was going to be an exchange of fire. They didn't think it would happen, and it did not happen. But the Russian jets have taken an interest in this, and they had warned the ship not to go into Crimean territorial waters, claiming that they are Russian waters. The Russian Coast Guard tried to do a maneuver to make sure that HMS Defender altered course. But the warship continued on down that recognized shipping lane, and we could see the coast as it was well within 12 miles of Crimea. It is now sailing in international waters, but Russian jets are still buzzing this Royal Navy warship as we proceed into the next part of the journey towards Georgia. He says this was a deliberate move by the Royal Navy warship, which is on its way to Georgia. Okay, man. I don't know if this is just going to be another blip or some static. Maybe it leads to nothing. We've seen similar things in the past. Hopefully that's the case. But we are seeing quite a bit of escalation. Russian war games. China invading the Taiwanese air defense zone with more warplanes than it's ever sent, 28. And we have this story from the other day from Newsweek. China state media warns of counterattack with Russia to U.S.'s serious provocations. Of course, they've been staging war games. They're blaming us. And you know what? That may be the case. I'm not here to defend Russia or China. I'm not a fan. But it certainly seems like Western powers are making deliberate actions. Now, it could be that these actions are in response to other actions, but you see how this goes. It's a tit for tat. Hopefully we don't enter what's called kinetic warfare. Newsweek reports, the Global Times, a Chinese state-run outlet, railed against the U.S. on Tuesday, warning America that it's overestimating its strength and should tread lightly if it doesn't want to face attacks from both China and Russia. China and Russia have grown closer as their relationships with the U.S. deteriorated, raising concerns about a potential alliance. As President Joe Biden attempts to repair America's ties with Russia, China's vehemently reinforced the narrative that Beijing and Moscow are united against the U.S. Quote, China and Russia will not take the initiative in provoking the U.S. and its allies. But if they encounter new serious provocations, the two countries' counterattack will be determined and immediate, the Global Times wrote in an editorial. Biden and Russian President Putin both hailed the summit last week as being productive and a first step in an attempt to move toward a stable relationship. While the two saw eye to eye on the disaster that would be a nuclear war, they weren't on the same footing when it came to cyber attacks or Alexei Navalny, Putin's top opponent, who remains imprisoned. The American president has pushed for Navalny's release, warning Putin that his death would not bode well for Russia. On Sunday, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan announced the U.S. was preparing another package of sanctions to put on Russia over Navalny's poisoning. Sullivan added that the U.S. rallied its European allies to impose costs on Russia for its use of a chemical agent on the citizen, a claim Moscow denies. Russia pushed back on the forthcoming sanctions, and Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova said on Telegram that Russia's always followed America's illegal actions with a legitimate response. China capitalized on Sullivan's remarks on Sunday, including pressure he put on China to cooperate with additional investigations into the COVID-19 origin. The Global Times acknowledged China is the strongest country in the world, but warned it may be overestimating its hand. Quote, the U.S. cannot do anything to China and Russia, and this is the reality that the world can see and understand. It wants to unite its allies to contain China and Russia, but it is ridiculous that it thinks this will have any strategic effect. Along with launching a counterattack with Russia if the U.S. provokes the countries, China warned America that it will strike heavily if U.S. intelligence agencies investigate the COVID-19 origin. Biden instructed the intelligence community to redouble its efforts to reach a more definitive conclusion about how the pandemic began. Initial investigations yield itself to the theory that COVID-19 originated naturally, but the intelligence community hasn't ruled out the possibility that the pandemic started in a laboratory. The lab leak hypothesis, once largely dismissed as a fringe belief, steeped in conspiracy, but it's gained traction in recent months. Helping fuel the theory is a report that staff members at the Wuhan Institute of Virology were hospitalized with flu-like symptoms before China reported its first case of COVID-19 to the World Health Organization. China stands firm in its denial that the Wuhan Institute of Virology could be the origin point of COVID. The G7 nations joined America's calls for a thorough probe into the origin of COVID and have been critical of Navalny's imprisonment. Now, when Biden called for that investigation, Chinese state media said that they must start mass producing nuclear weapons to send a shiver down the spine of the U.S. elites. They do not fear the U.S. elite. They do not fear the U.S. political class. They do not fear the U.S. military. And this means we may be closer to war than we've been in a very, very long time, especially when it comes to China. China doesn't fear us at all. Look what we got going on. Check this out. From thesun.co.uk, war footing. U.S. scrambles F-22 jets and carrier strike group to face off with Russian war games near Hawaii ahead of Putin summit. When Vladimir Putin was meeting with Joe Biden, Russia and China pressed upon our strategic areas. I'll put it that way. Russia staged a massive war game, the largest since the Cold War, about 300 miles west of Hawaii. The U.S. scrambled jets. China sent 28 warplanes into the Taiwanese air defense zone, more than they've ever done. I believe this was sending a message to Joe Biden that they do not fear you, and they are threatening you, saying, look what we're going to do, and what are you going to do about it? The threat against Taiwan is very serious for the West. Now, I mentioned this, and I've mentioned this several times today, but we had Steve Bannon on the Tim Cast IRL podcast, and he said Taiwan is Silicon Valley West. If you're upset about the shortages we're seeing in electronics, vehicles right now, just wait until China reclaims or takes Taiwan. Then we're not going to have our chips. There's already a major shortage, and many of them, if not most, are made in Taiwan. So this is bad news for us. If China does take Taiwan, shuts down their production or seizes control of it, then they are going to be able to rapidly expand their military capabilities and their economy at a major detriment to the United States. So, of course, the U.S. has an interest in stopping that. But it seems like we may not be able to. Now, of course, I can point out this war game that happened just west of Hawaii. It's important to understand that war takes two parties. It's not just Russia saying, screw you guys, we'll do what we want. It is a back and forth with both sides asserting they are correct. Over at the AP, May 28th, they say, as Russian tensions simmer, NATO conducts massive war games. You want to talk about the warning shots in the Black Sea? Check this out. They say aboard HMS Queen Elizabeth, as tensions with Russia simmer, thousands of NATO troops, several warships, and dozens of aircraft are taking part in military exercises stretching across the Atlantic, through Europe, and into the Black Sea region. You see where this is going. The war games, dubbed Steadfast Defender 21, are aimed at simulating the 30-nation military organization's response to an attack on any one of its members. It will test NATO's ability to deploy troops from America and keep supply lines open. Yes, Russia staged war games, the largest since the Cold War west of Hawaii. But NATO was staging massive war games, which included regions and areas in the Black Sea. That was probably seen by Russia as a provocation or a threat, and they responded. They're going to say, already in recent years, the U.S. and its allies have deployed troops and equipment in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland to try to reassure those members, neighboring Russia, that their partners will ride to the rescue should they come under attack. Russia's decision last month to send thousands of troops to the border area with Ukraine has raised concern at the military alliance, which launched one of the biggest ever defense spending initiatives after Russian troops annexed Ukraine's Crimea in 2014. Top NATO brass insist the military exercises, involving some 9,000 troops from 20 nations, are not aimed at Russia specifically, but they focus on the Black Sea region, where Russia stands accused of blocking the free navigation of ships. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the exercises send an important message to any potential adversary. NATO is ready. NATO is there to defend all our allies. And this exercise sends a clear message about our ability to transport a large number of troops, equipment across the Atlantic, across Europe, and to project maritime power. Stoltenberg told the AP aboard a British aircraft carrier off the coast of Portugal. The ship, the HMS Queen Elizabeth, is the pride of the British Navy. It's making its maiden voyage and carrying 18 F-35 jets, the first ever deployment of so many of the fifth generational planes aboard an aircraft carrier. The ship's presence, part of a 6 to 7 month deployment that will take it south past India through Southeast Asia and to the Philippine Sea, is aimed in part at restoring Britain's tarnished image as a major global power since it left the European Union. Adorned with high-tech U.S. jets and flanked by warships from other NATO countries, the Carrier Strike Force also stands as an important symbol of unity as the world's biggest security organization tries to recover from 4 tumultuous years under the Trump administration. Stoltenberg will chair a NATO summit in Brussels on June 14th with current U.S. President Joe Biden and his counterparts keen to usher in a new era of transatlantic cooperation as troops leave its longest ever mission in Afghanistan while tensions with Russia and increasingly China mount. Now, of course, that's already since passed, but I wanted to point out what's been going on and give you some of the context so you understand why we may see a response from Russia and China. Now, I'll give you guys a quick little geography lesson here. We have the Black Sea. For those that aren't familiar, you can see here we have Istanbul. In order to make these moves to the Mediterranean and get access to Georgia, to Russia, to Crimea, you have to go through the Bosphorus Strait, which is right in the middle of Istanbul. Of course, Turkey controls this. Recently, the HMS Trent was seen moving through it. Turkey could very well shut it down, but if they did, it would effectively be an act of war. Now, in the Black Sea, this is said to be Russia's only warm water port. They do have access through Syria and with Tartus into the Mediterranean, but that would require moving through Turkey and Iran into Syria. For Russia itself, they need the Black Sea, which is very likely why they came in and seized Crimea. This is, call it what you want. We're at war, okay? We have been at war for some time. It's just not, people expect war to be ships crashing the beaches of Normandy. No, war can be cyber, it can be economic, it can be sanctions. We have this story this is from June 5th. The Royal Naval Patrol vessel in Putin's backyard, HMS Trent, is spotted in the Bosphorus after Black Sea mission to support Ukraine. These things are happening. These are all the grains of sand that will eventually be called a war. The saying goes, how many grains of sand make a heap? I say it all the time, so you maybe get it, but for those that don't, each and every one of these stories is us placing another grain of sand in a pile. Eventually, we will look at it and say, that's a war. Now, it's not too dissimilar to what we talk about in terms of U.S. Civil War. Each and every one of these incidents may be nothing on its own, but in 50 years, they may say that these were all operations in the ongoing war in the Black Sea due to Russia's seizing of Crimea. You need to think back to World War II with Germany seizing certain areas of other countries, claiming that it was historically German or that ethnic Germans lived there. At the time, Neville Chamberlain was like, they're just taking back their land. And he was demure. Peace in our time, he said, but they never stopped. Of course, we can see now with China building these artificial reefs, these atolls, these military bases. They are expanding their power into the South China Sea, into the Pacific. They're doing this because they want to take Taiwan. Here's the story from Business Insider. U.S. leaders say China and Russia's military ties are phony, but there still isn't much they can do about them. Now, I've heard this, that Russia and China very much hate each other. And there is conflict in eastern parts of Russia or the areas where it clashes with China, Chinese territory. But whether or not they hate each other is less relevant as to whether or not they hate us more or they fear us more. Russia might not like China. I mean, they share borders. Russia's massive, by the way. But they can certainly agree the bigger threat to them is the U.S. And if that's the case, then we absolutely must remain vigilant. And for those of you who are not paying attention, start. I don't know if there's going to be a grand international conflict. We flicker back and forth between where's the fourth turning going to hit? Where's the great crisis going to be? Is it going to be an American Civil War? Well, I'll put it this way. 80 years ago, we had a world war. 80 years before, international conflict. 80 years before that, a civil war, an internal conflict. And 80 years before that, an international conflict. Perhaps we are now set for an internal conflict, not an international one. We'll see. I think these tensions with Russia and China are very serious. And you know what's scary is it may be both. As the U.S. is busy fighting itself internally, we may be entering a period where China sees that we're weak, vulnerable, and Russia agrees. And they say, if we work together, we can stop them, crush them, and take power in the world. Take it away from the U.S. It is our internal conflict which is giving up the opportunity to China to make these moves. Let me show you a few things to back this up. First, we have from Civics. Joe Biden's approval rating now stands after 65,000 responses at 47% disapproval to 46% approval. We can see that at the start of this, Biden had 48% approval. Now, of course, there are Real Clear Politics and other aggregates have Biden at a higher approval rating. So he may be higher than this. But what I'm showing is, at least according to the ongoing polling from Civics, we can see that Biden has flipped and it's flickered back and forth, but now he's moved into disapproval territory. Okay, this is bad for us. Confidence in Biden is shaking. Not that there was very much to begin with. Biden is seen as weak by I would believe most Americans, to be completely honest. I'm not sure I trust all of these polls. I think they're biased, but people voted for people voted for Joe Biden. Did I say Trump? People voted for Joe Biden. They see him as weak. They voted for Joe Biden because they don't like Donald Trump. Did I say Donald Trump before? Let me clarify one more time. Joe Biden is facing high disapproval, and the world knows it, and China knows it, and the people of America know it. Joe Biden was elected because people hated Donald Trump. But Joe Biden is not a leader. From CNN, Putin praises Biden, calling him a professional following Geneva summit. All right, that's it for me. Vladimir Putin, he's praising Joe Biden. Right. He's calling him focused. That's right. Mr. Biden is a professional, and you need to be very careful when working with him so as not to miss something, Putin said during a video conference meeting with graduates from Russia's Graduate School of Public Administration. He himself does not miss a thing, I assure you. And this was absolutely clear to me. Let me say it again. He is focused. He knows what he wants to achieve and does it very skillfully, and you can instantly sense it. I'll tell you what I saw after this. Democrats saying, ha, even Putin recognizes that Joe Biden is strong and Republicans are so dumb. Seriously. I don't trust Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin's interests are making sure that we have a weak president like Biden. Now, that could be reaching too far. The simple solution is Putin has praised Trump. He's praising Biden, and he may just be steel manning his opponent. He doesn't want to underestimate the United States, and he doesn't want his allies to either. Because if Biden projects weakness upon the U.S., or I should say overconfidence, thinking that it would throw the Americans for a loop, it can mean the same things for his allies. But let's play this game. Vladimir Putin can come out, say all of these great things about Biden, convince many of these Democrats they made the right choice. Aha, Putin's scared. He can then go to his allies and say, it's not true. Biden's weak, and you know it. We just want them to think he's strong so they vote for him again. That's right. That way, when they decide to make moves against us, there will be nothing we can do to stop it. They're going to mention and say the Russian president's praise was striking in part because Russia had tried to portray Biden as mentally unstable during the presidential campaign. ABC News reported in July that the Trump administration withheld an intelligence bulletin warning of the Russian plot to spread the misinformation. Putin was also setting a different tone than the pro-Kremlin Russian political commentators who more commonly see Democrats as more hostile to Russia, intent on using human rights as a cudgel to sanction and vilify Moscow. Think about that for a second. Why praise Joe Biden? The Democrats say the Russians are nuts, they're bad, they're evil. And then Putin comes out and says, Joe Biden's focused, he's with it. Because Joe Biden is weak. He would rather have the weak president that allows him the opportunity to take Crimea, to control the Black Sea, to team up with China, do whatever they want because Joe Biden ain't got it. There's more than Joe Biden at play here. There are other people in the U.S. government who are running things and making decisions. So it's fair to say he's got to contend with Kamala Harris and other Democrats as well. I would not. I will say this. I probably lean more towards Putin is trying to steel man. Right? Straw man argument being you make the weakest version of your opponent, knock it down with ease. Steel man being you make the strongest version of your opponent. Why? I think Putin wants to make sure that his allies, his people do not underestimate the U.S. under any circumstance. That is a weakness. When you underestimate your opponent, you fail. Not always. But Sun Tzu said it. The art of war, one of the most important things you can remember is never underestimate your opponent. I'll put it this way. If you're going into battle with someone, if you're going to go into a tournament, do you say, I don't need to exercise or practice to compete against this person? No. You double your efforts. You do the best you possibly can. You are the strongest you can be. You want to break a record. So I certainly don't think Putin genuinely means that Biden, is all that with it. But I certainly think he's trying to project the U.S.'s strength. He wants people to see the U.S. as strong. He doesn't want them to underestimate us. You see, China has been claiming we're weak. China said you do not have a position of strength. Putin's doing the opposite. Hey, maybe it's a good cop, bad cop, but I'll put it this way. China makes a very serious mistake in saying that we are weak. For sure. They can potentially say that. They could probably mean it. And it's bad for us in a lot of ways. They want our allies to be scared. Maybe then they say, okay, China will give you what you want because we know Biden won't protect us. At the same time, it's still a gamble. Just because Joe Biden may be weak doesn't mean the U.S. as a whole is. We may not be in the best position possible, but we certainly are very powerful. This will be interesting. This skirmish here in the Black Sea is a major escalation. It is alarming for sure. Warning shots, bombs dropped, planes buzzing overhead. I hope it's nothing. Hopefully things simmer down, and they very well may. In 2022, the Republicans may take the House back. In 2024, Trump may win again, and things may calm back down. And if that's the case, I think Trump would de-escalate tensions between Russia, but maybe not China. But if Trump does win, I can certainly see the left going insane, and then our great fourth turning conflict could turn out to be a civil war. We'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.